Then, next up in the news, you've got the families for the dozens of girls who died at Camp Mystic this summer now just kind of done waiting for answers, and they're ready for justice. Because back on July 4th, there was that catastrophic and deadly flood that hit central Texas, killing more than 130 people. And one of the places that got hit the hardest was Camp Mystic, a sleepaway camp for girls along the Guadalupe River. 25 girls and 2 counselors were killed in that flooding, and the community, they've been reeling ever since. And the families of those who died, they're now looking for some accountability, with the operators of Camp Mystic now facing 3 separate lawsuits accusing them of negligence and wrongful death. And all 3 of these were actually filed yesterday in Austin, and one of those came from the families of 5 children and 2 teenage counselors. In that suit, painting the Eastland family, who owned and operated Camp Mystic for generations, as overconfident and completely unprepared for the flood. And you have them adding that the camp's executive director, Dick Eastland, wasted precious time after getting the alert for life-threatening flash flooding from the National Weather Service, instead having his crew spend nearly an hour securing the camp's equipment before actually evacuating or even checking on campers. The warning, it came in at 1:14 a.m., and according to the suit, evacuations didn't start until around 2:30. But at that point, they were only able to evacuate 5 of the 11 cabins in the flood zone. And that also after telling many of the campers and the counselors to stay in the cabins even as water was flooding it. You also had the family further digging into Dick Eastland, who died the day of the flood after he was swept away in his SUV, which, according to an unnamed counselor, was full of campers. In this suit, it pushes back against the narrative of the camp supporters that this was a 1,000-year event that no one could have prepared for, and that Dick Eastland was a hero who died trying to save these girls. Instead, they say that Dick was actually grossly negligent for loading children into a vehicle in waist-deep and then neck-deep water and then trying to drive. And specifically, they're pointing out that driving through floodwaters goes directly against the advice of experts, including the Upper Guadalupe River Authority. And with that, saying that Dick should have known that because he was serving on the board of the River Authority at the time of his death. The suit also goes on to condemn the camp for their actions after the flooding as well, saying that it wasn't until the late morning of July 4th that parents were actually made aware that their daughters were unaccounted for. And in fact, by that point, some of the girls' bodies were already being found. But of course, even more than just the day of stuff, the families accused the camp of not having safety plans in place and even housing girls in cabins that they knew were flood risk.